After surviving a scare against the Colts, the Seahawks find themselves at 11-3, heading into arguably the biggest game of the NFL season to date, at home against the also 11-3 Rams. The Athletic's senior NFL writer and host of the Amazing Play Callers podcast, Jourdan Rodrigue, is here to break it down. Let's light him up.
I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts.
Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and along with my pernicious producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. And Jordan's going to join me later in the show, but first, cigars and whiskey. Cigar Thoughts is proud to be partnered with Seattle Cigar Concierge and Balvenie Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Seattle Cigar Concierge and I have teamed up to release 2 versions of high-quality Cigar Thoughts cigars, both of which you can purchase by following the link on the show page or by visiting cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Mike and I love doing the show, and there are 2 ways y'all listening and watching can help support it so that we can keep the episodes coming. One is by purchasing the cigars, and the other is by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, where you can watch full episodes as well as the funny and insightful clips that Mike puts together. Give a thumbs up to the stuff you like, and let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts. Now, I'm recovering from an unfortunate allergy attack courtesy of the in-laws' new cat, so if my voice sounds a little off, please bear with me. My guest today is carving out some much appreciated time during her ridiculous schedule right now, and will be here shortly to talk about the Seahawks and the Rams. So I wanted to use this time to give my thoughts on Seattle's win on Sunday. The assumption shared by many, including me, leading up to the Seahawks game against Indianapolis on Sunday was that it would be a bloodbath. The Colts staggered into Seattle, having lost 3 in a row and 4 of their last 5, and were on the heels of a season-ending injury to starting quarterback Daniel Jones. It felt really bleak for them, and it was almost a joke what happened next. I mean, it led to one of the most improbable and meme-friendly developments of the season as 44-year-old Hall of Fame semifinalist Phillip Rivers came out of retirement to face the number 1 defense by DVOA on the road. But instead of witnessing the type of shellacking that the Seahawks have been handing out recently, Old Man Rivers made up for his lack of mobility and arm strength with anticipation and short-range accuracy, and frankly, just kept the Colts on schedule and didn't really provide a lot of opportunities for game-changing plays from the Seahawks. It, in hindsight, makes a lot of sense, but was also not what I was expecting. I don't think it was what most people were expecting. And that's not to overstate necessarily what Rivers did. He only threw for 120 yards, and I think Seattle did a pretty good job against one of the elite running backs in the league in Jonathan Taylor. They held him to, 87 yards on 25 carries. So 3.5 yards per carry from a guy that's been dominant for much of the season. But again, there was a massive disparity in field position. It's something that Seattle has battled really over the middle and late parts of the season. And that meant that the Colts offense didn't have to go too far to get their 3 field goals and a touchdown. Now, would I have liked to have seen another thrashing from this defense? I mean, of course. But I didn't really come away from this one as discouraged as you might think. Because if we're honest, the opportunities for sacks and turnovers just simply weren't very abundant in this one. The Colts ran it more often than they passed. The ball was out in about 2 seconds nearly every time they did throw. And what Seattle did was not overcommit. Instead, they just rallied to the ball over and over and over again. And outside of the 1 short field touchdown, they just forced Indy's kicker to make a bunch of long kicks. And I can live with that. What I liked was not only the cohesiveness of the defense, it was the continued ascension of Nick Emenwari into an absolute game wrecker on defense. He was incredible again in this game, and he continues to make a strong case for Defensive Rookie of the Year. What I'm about to say, I say as you guys know, as someone who would have been fine with Seattle taking Emenwari in the first round. But he is so far ahead of where I thought he would be at this point. This is, like I said last week, the type of player I knew that he could be. I shouldn't say knew, but really thought that Emenwari could become. But given everything they were throwing at him, given the rawness of a lot of his tape at South Carolina, this wasn't even within my range of outcomes for him this early as a rookie. To see him playing with as much ferocity and freedom and honestly headiness so far, it's been amazing to see. And I think it raises not only the floor, but the ceiling of an already impressive defense. My area of concern is, once again, the offense. And still, if you look at Seattle's offense, especially their passing offense from a season-long perspective, they're good. They are a top 10 passing offense. But so much of that is being carried by those first 6-7 games of the season, because since then, they've been more of like a slightly above average offense. Most of that production has come in spotty moments. It's a half against Tennessee. It's a half against Atlanta. We haven't seen a really complete game from this offense in a while. And frankly, that's just not going to work against really good teams. And it almost didn't work in this one. I mean, they just didn't have the same margin for error that they had against Max Brosmer. They didn't have the same margin for error that they did against an Atlanta defense that has lately really struggled to keep up with effective passing games. They, got cooking again just before halftime and just enough in the second half to steal this game, but they still can't run the ball. They never found the end zone, and they needed Jason Myers to have the game of his life in order to avoid what would have been one of the biggest, if not the biggest upset of the entire NFL season. So it's like, just because you've been able to coast in the second half against Arizona, you were able to coast in the second half against Washington, you were able to coast in the second half against the Vikings, got away with coasting in the first half against Atlanta. It's going to take full games from this offense from here on out. Like, maybe you'll get away with it against Carolina, depending on which version of that team shows up in 2 weeks. But against the Rams and the 49ers and whoever you're going to play in the playoffs, you're going to have to bring it. And we haven't seen a complete game from this offense in a while. So that's going to be the number one thing I'm looking for over these last 3 games. And, it's like the Colts, their season felt over coming into this one, and they gave Seattle everything that they had. And this week's opponent is much, much better. What I will say is, while I don't think Sam Darnold was like amazing in this game, I don't think he was the reason for the struggles. I think he did pretty well given the circumstances. And he was very good in the fourth quarter when he really needed to be, which was very encouraging to see, because, in each of Seattle's 3 losses, we've seen them come up short at the end of games. We've had turnovers that ended the game, the fumble against the 49ers. We had the interception against the Bucks, and then settling for a very long field goal that was no good against the Rams. But to see him go down in the second half and repeatedly at least put them in position to score and have Myers come through, I thought Darnold was fine in this game. But they just can't run the ball, and it's making them really one-dimensional. Now, the good news is Jacson did his damn thing again, and we're starting to see some consistency in secondary and tertiary options from Cooper Kupp, who's had a couple of really nice games in a row, and Rashid Shaheed's had 2, I think, really nice games in a row. And frankly, that's what they're going to need down the stretch. That is the encouraging part on offense to me. So I don't know what the answer is with the run game, because this team isn't even sniffing 4 yards per carry, but I'm worried that their ceiling is going to be a lot lower than we'd like unless that develops really soon. Which brings me to my guest today. She is one of the most tapped in people in all of NFL media right now, and one of my favorites to listen to. She does incredible work both for The Athletic, the NFL Daily with Greg Rosenthal, and her podcast, The Play Callers. She's also extremely in tune with the Seahawks' next opponent, having covered the Rams for years. She is Jourdan Rodrigue, and I am thrilled to have her back with us. Jourdan, thank you so much for making the time.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back on. And also, how fired up are we for Thursday night? Holy cow, man. This is going to rock.
Let's get right into it. I mean, is this the biggest matchup of the NFL season so far?
Yeah, and actually, I just came from the NFL Daily Studio, and my co-host Greg Rosenthal has posited this is the biggest Thursday night football game of all time because it's the first time two 11-win teams are facing each other. I think Greg loves hyperbole a bit, which for me, I'm like,
not our friend Greg.
I'm the straight man that kind of like talks him down a little bit. But no, it is a huge, forgive the language, it's a big ass game, and I am so excited.
It's a huge fucking game. And I mean, like, we knew it was when the schedules came out. And I think you and I both thought these teams would be pretty good this year.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be this heavyweight of a fight. And 11-3 is better than I thought either of these teams would be at this point in the season, before the season, but not out of the realm of possibility. What surprises me is that they're the only 11-win teams in the NFC. We haven't seen the Eagles maintain their dominance. We've seen the Lions fall off. We've seen the Packers, even despite bringing on Micah Parsons, falter. And now they've lost Micah Parsons. And so it really feels like the winner of this game on Thursday is going to get the number 1 seed in the NFC. Am I overstating that?
No, I don't think you are at all. I think these are the two best teams in football right now. I would say the Broncos ascending the way that they are giving them a run for their money. Yes. The Bills and the Texans are sort of lurking behind the scenes. And then I do take the Lions and the Packers and even the Bears, although the Bears are still incomplete. They're still finding themselves, but they're winning games, right? And that's what matters. I feel like these two teams, the results of this game, every narrative is going to go into whoever wins this game is the Super Bowl favorite, truly. Like not just to be in it, but to win it. And I think that's the sort of the status of a game like this with two of the most complete teams we've seen in a very long time in the NFL.
Where do you see the Rams' edges being in this one? And conversely, what are the Seahawks' advantages?
Well, I think the Rams have a better run game right now. I think that
not saying much, unfortunately.
I love the Seahawks, so I'm trying to be very polite because I know
you don't got to be polite here.
I know.
Speak your truth.
But I love, and you know me, I'm like, well, everyone's trying hard, but like
that's true. I will give them that. The Seahawks run game is trying hard. Yeah.
No, but the Rams, I always would gripe at Sean McVay about like. For years, he said ever since the Todd Gurley era, he's wanted a 2-back system and he's wanted to try to actually run the ball behind two really talented running backs and get this run game, the dimension that it has now, because it's obviously it hasn't been for years, just a wide zone team. It's predominantly a duo team and a gap scheme run game, but they do a lot of middle zone and they use their screen game as an extension of their wider zone run game. So it's got a lot of diversity to it. And it's also got Kyren Williams running harder, just as hard as we know him to, and it kind of getting spurred on a little bit by the fact that Blake Corum is also running really, really well, and Blake Corum has a little bit more of that explosive home run hitting ability, whereas Kyren is going to get you doubles almost every carry. So I think the dimension of that is really solid. Where I give the Seahawks such an advantage is going to be this defensive front, honestly. I mean, they're so complete everywhere, but especially against Matthew Stafford in the rain specifically, and especially against a line that has played well, but does not see many opponents that are as complete and can move around their defensive linemen to attack various pressure points as well as the Seahawks can do. That is something where I do think the Seahawks have a significant advantage, specifically in the past. Now, if the Rams decide they want to run it all day, which I don't buy Sean McVay doing that, but if they decide they want to, I think that the Rams have the advantage there. But when Matthew Stafford drops back, I give Seattle the advantage against that front.
How much of that opinion is influenced by the likely fact that Devontae Adams is not going to be there? I mean, you talk about terrible timing for a receiver who, I mean, people who watch this show know he is on the short list of my favorite players that are not on the Seahawks. Just rest up, Devontae. We got to take the long-term view here. No sense forcing it on a short week. How much does his absence, and I'm assuming that they're not going to try and force a hamstring recovery on 3 days, affect this game plan for Sean McVay? Or do they feel like, hey, we can still go with the 13 personnel and we just have a little bit more puka? Because he went out and had a career game, granted against a much softer defense, but he just picked up his own slack and Devontae's slack after Adams got hurt.
I know Puka doesn't even play full games anymore because of the personnel changes that the Rams do, and he still is like outgaining almost every receiver in the NFL, with one notable exception here on this side of things. But you know, I love that question. First of all, watch out, because the Immortal Chamber was spotted on site at the Rams facilities this week. Right. So I don't know how well it can do for hammies, but it definitely did well for Matthew Stafford's back. But what's interesting, I love the question, because what's really interesting about the Rams move from 11 personnel, 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back, to 13 personnel, which is 3 tight ends, 1 receiver, and 1 running back, is that they skipped right over 12 personnel, right? And for some, it's like, okay, well, that seems like overly complicated, but really it's almost overly simple, because they're using these tight ends in the similar types of route combinations that they use with Sean McVay's 11 personnel playbook. So we can have 3 tight ends that are running routes. And I don't know that Seattle Seahawks fans have seen Colby Parkinson run routes the way he's running routes here in Los Angeles this season. And they have 3 tight ends who can do this effectively. So you're almost like keeping everything still looking very much the same. You're just increasing the size of the body who's attacking you. And so that obviously dictates different things to the defense. And to your question, Seattle is the best in the league at countering 13 personnel. I mean, they were a nightmare matchup for the Rams when the Rams tried to go heavy for them last year. And I was talking
they just don't even switch their personnel. That was what was so cool about it. They're like, we'll just stay at nickel.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
We don't care.
Exactly. And Nick Emanwari obviously being huge. I know that, you know, he's a rookie, so he's going to ebb and flow over the course of the season. But because he can play the Buffalo nickel or a large nickel, and he can also has the speed to play a smaller nickel against smaller, faster personnel, it's magical for the Seahawks. And they can keep their front structure the same too, which means they can do all the dastardly things that they like to do up front. Where I think this Davante Adams injury becomes crucial is without Davante Adams, your 11 personnel does not look like it would with him on the field. You do have Puka Nacua, but you're also looking at Konate Mumfield, maybe Tutu Atwell, who's all but disappeared from this offense, and Jordan Whittington being a sub or like a little hybrid like fullback guy. So you can't really switch back and forth heavy to light as easily. And I think that's where the Seahawks and Mike Macdonald, if I know anything about Mike Macdonald, are trying to figure out if they can capitalize. And I also think that's why there's a little gamesmanship about this injury coming out of Los Angeles, because they know it sets them back.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned Seattle's advantage being on the defensive line. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on I agree. I believe Seattle defensive line has an advantage over the Rams offensive line. I also think the Rams defensive line has an advantage over Seattle's offensive line. Do you think Seattle's advantage in that regard is bigger than the Rams?
If we were going to put these D lines 1-to-1 right now, I think that recently in a total game, Seattle's defensive line is affecting offenses more. Now that's not to, turn our noses up at the Rams defensive line. I think that if you're looking at defensive line, offensive line, defensive line, offensive line, I do give Seattle a bigger advantage. The Rams, where they have an advantage structurally over Seattle's offensive line, is not coming from sacks. They're actually under league average at turning their pressure rate into sacks, but they're forcing turnovers at a league high with pressure. And frankly, Sam Darnold padded their stats quite a bit in their last matchup, because the 4 interceptions came from either true pressure or simulated pressure. And it really is the way that they're affecting not necessarily the offensive line as a group, but the offense in totality, is because they're not really getting sacks, but they are forcing turnovers when they do pressure. So I think it's a very subtle nuance, a very subtle change. Seattle's point of their pressure is going to want to be to take down Matthew Stafford, especially in the rain where he's had fumble issues and all of these things.
Right.
But the Rams, it's almost like their plan against Seattle is not necessarily even to take down Sam Darnold. It is to get him to make mistakes with the pressure looks that they bring. And that's been the case against several quarterbacks they've faced this year.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that what the Rams do is so unique. And I think you did a really nice job talking about this. It wasn't against the Seahawks, but it was after one of their recent wins. And it's something we talked about in the show after the Seahawks game, is that they run a lot of stunts with Chris Shula, but not in the traditional way, where usually when you see a stunt, and I know most of you listening and watching know what that is, but if you don't, it's when defensive linemen cross each other instead of just rushing straight up their gap. And most of the time that happens as soon as the ball is snapped. But the Rams, one, because they have the athleticism to win at the snap point, are actually able to get a yard or two upfield and then run their stunt, which not only creates pressure, it also confuses passing lanes. And I think that's where Sam really has struggled in the past. And let's be real, since his rebirth, his two worst performances have been against Chris Shula's defense. And so I'm really curious to see, it was like in that first game in the playoffs last year, what was he, sacked 9 times? Like that's insane. Okay, he gets sacked 9 times. And it felt like in the first matchup this year, he was like, okay, I'm not going to get sacked this time. And so he didn't. He didn't get sacked. But as a result, 3 of his 4 interceptions, and you can make a case that all 4 were ill-advised throws, where maybe taking the sack or throwing it away is actually the play. I'm curious to see if he has a counterpunch on this, because if it's 3 in a row, we've got a real issue.
Yeah, and I love that point too, because it is they attacked it differently each time, right? Like Chris Shula designed things differently each time. I think a lot of people, I know your viewers and listeners do not forget this, but a lot of people who are talking about this game right now are forgetting that Seattle almost doubled the Rams' total yardage in this first matchup. If it weren't for specifically the turnovers, Seattle would have won that game. And instead, the Rams narrowly won it. And so I feel like I'm curious to see what Sam Darnold and the Seahawks offensive assistants and Clint and all of the O-line guys and everything. I'm curious to see what they think Chris Shula is going to do, because that's a huge part of it. They clearly thought this last game that they were going to pure rush and try to get these sacks, but because the Rams delaying the stunts the way that they did and also running some of these sim pressures that they did and delayed blitzes, that actually tells me they weren't trying to get the sack. That instead they were simply trying to F up his timing and to, I wish they called it crisscross applesauce. I feel like that would be more fun than the word stunt, right? But
wouldn't you just love to hear the coaches at the podium afterwards talk about how they ran that?
Yeah,
that was the reason for their success.
Yeah, so we ran a 3rd down crisscross applesauce, and I would love that truly. But it tells me that they weren't trying to sack him specifically. Like sacks are great, but what the Rams have found, and I think Chris Shula is one of the best in the league at this, is designing quarterback affecting pressure that doesn't necessarily result in a sack. And that takes a lot of you gotta be a good communicator, because your young players, they want to sack the quarterback, right? They want the stats, they want the ego, like all of that, especially young guys on this defensive line. But sometimes it's not the right way to win a game, and I think that's what they showed very effectively last time.
Yeah, if I'm going down and I'm just looking at these two teams and we're lining up the positions against each other, I think the Rams have advantage at quarterback. I think they definitely have an advantage in the run game. I think offensive line is close enough. Maybe it's Rams a little bit of an edge. I think receivers, certainly with Devontae Adams out, becomes a little bit more equal, because you said it earlier, Puka would be a true 1-of-1 if it wasn't for Jacson, Smith, and Njigba, right? Like the two of them are completely breaking all of the efficiency and volume graphs for receiver production this year. I'm willing to call that a wash. I think Seattle's got an edge. A defensive line, I think they're close at linebacker. Probably give Seattle an edge there. Where I think Seattle has the biggest advantage in this game is the secondary. You mentioned Nick Emenwari earlier, and I'm glad you did, because this is something I said this on the show last week. The way that he's playing is what I expected from Nick Emenwari in like year 3, not already. And part of it is because he is acclimated to a complicated series of roles quicker than I think you can reasonably expect any rookie, much less one that came in so raw. But I think that he's got extra freedom because everybody else in that secondary is so locked in. Devin Witherspoon playing out of his mind. Josh Jobe has come on to the point where he and Reek Woolen, you forget which one of them is on the field And they've both been fantastic for the last month and a half. And then Julian Love is back at safety. Kobe Bryant continues to play well. And so it provides so much more freedom for a young player like Emin Wari to see ball, get ball, which is his superpower, instead of trying to make sure that everybody else is doing what they're supposed to be doing so that he can do what he's supposed to be doing, right? Whereas on the Rams side, you see some flashes from Emmanuel Forbes, but their Kobe isn't Seattle's Kobe. You know, Kobe Durant is someone that if Sam Darnold has time, I think he's going to hunt him with JSN on some of these deeper crossing routes that they've been so successful with. Rashid Shaheed has, over the last 2 weeks, really stepped into that secondary role that Seattle's been missing for most of the season. Cooper Kupp's coming off his best 2-game stretch of the season. It's a revenge game for him. If Seattle's going to win this game, I do think, as crazy as it sounds, given how Sam Darnold has played against the Rams the last 2 matchups, I really do think it comes with him just going over the top of them.
Yeah, and I think they'll try. I think they'll definitely try, because what I can see the Rams doing is running a little bit of a deeper shell, which they actually haven't done a ton this year, but certainly when they're trying to cap explosives. I think they also, you saw this with the way that they covered/struggled to cover JSN last time. They didn't even have Rashid Shaheed at full strength yet, right? Because it was just after the trade deadline and all of that. But you saw that they sort of were like resigned to the fact that he was going to get some explosive plays. Like it was almost like the pick your poison type of defense when you have a player that's special. And now you have 2 players who can stretch the field in a significant way. I think where the Rams, the pick your poison of the Rams this time is, do we give everything, do we throw everything we have at trying to cap the explosives? Understanding that we don't have Quentin Lake right now, their star, their Buffalo nickel, who's been playing all over the field for them. He's hurt. Okay, so if you play that deep of a shell to make sure that they can't go over the top of you, or try to hope that the pressure can get to Sam or confuse him enough to where you're not running some of these deep like shell zone beaters, which we won't bring up because that's a hot whatever, like very one-sided, by the way, debate recently on social media. Mina Kimes, my goat,
it sure
forever.
is.
So, but like you have to, they would say, they'd acquiesce and say, okay, if we're going to do that, knowing we don't have the speed at corner to keep up with both of these receivers, especially on the perimeter, then AJ Barner might cook on the interior and up the seam because Quentin Lake is not there. And, you know, the Rams safeties have been solid, but they're going to play likely Cam Kinchin's back a little bit further. And they don't have that like mismatch neutralizer in the middle of the field the way that Quentin Lake was for them. So they could use a Nick Ammonwari, frankly.
Who couldn't, right?
Yeah, right. Like, and it was so funny. I watch him play. I love it. And we were talking with Nate Tice before the start of last season, and we were like, "What's the future of defense?" Right? And we were like, "Oh man, if we could just see these big safeties come back who could run." And lo and behold, Mike McDonald, of course, goes out and gets one, right? And the perfect one, by the way. Yes. And like, it's just so fun because he nullifies, I like to call him a personnel neutralizer, because he sort of neutralizes any of the heavy personnel you want to use against.
That's right.
And then on the other side, I wouldn't say Quentin Lake has the speed, but he definitely has the acumen and experience at this point to know where he's supposed to be. And that would have really helped them, because I think this is a pick your poison. You don't want to get beat by the explosives, right? Because that could flip the game so fast for them, especially in weather when they want to run the ball. So you're probably going to have to leave the middle of the field at least somewhat open and pick and like basically accept the 1,000 paper cuts here and try to use the perimeters as extra, like the sidelines as extra defenders and stuff, because you just don't have the speed to keep up with both of these receivers at once.
Yeah, and we haven't seen Shaheed used for his superpower in Seattle yet, which really is taking the top off of a defense. And I don't know how much of that is acclimation. I don't know how much of it is the fact that Seattle is basically giving away the first 2 quarters on offense every week for some reason and can't get more than a field goal in the first half against doesn't matter who they're playing. And it almost bit them this past week. I think if they do that against the Rams, I'm not expecting them to just shut down the prohibitive favorite for MVP and one of the best offenses in the league for 8 straight quarters. Like, that's not going to happen. Seattle's going to have to score early in this game. But Shaheed, the way that he made his money, the way that he will make his money moving forward and made himself so valuable to Clint Kubiak in New Orleans was, even with a quarterback that didn't have a bazooka for an arm in Derek Carr, was still beating teams over the top. We haven't seen that yet. So at some point that is going to happen too. And, if it happens this week, I think, especially if it happens early, which is something Kubiak did a ton of in New Orleans, is take deep shots in the first quarter.
Early, yes.
That has not been happening in Seattle for the last couple of months. So if they're able to pull that off, that I think allows them to start swinging some of the other clubs in their bag. And I think that's going to be really important. On the other side, I am very excited to see what Colby Parkinson is going to do, because this is 5 straight games with a touchdown, or 6 in the last 6 games, something like that. And we saw glimpses of it in Seattle. In fact, we've had Colby on this show. He's a big cigar guy. Guy's got the best cigar collection of anyone I've met.
I love it.
It's amazing. Yeah. And he and I have stayed in touch, since he went to the Rams, and you can just see that, okay, you talk about what Nick Emmanwori is on defense in terms of being a size, speed, and mismatch. I'm not putting Parkinson on Emmanwori's level in terms of raw athleticism, but in terms of, if you're as big as Colby, you're not going to be as fast. And if you're as fast as Colby, you're not going to be as big. And that feels like the dream McVay tight end, because he knows how to get that guy in space. If it was like, hey, go be Kyle Pitts or Travis Kelce, where you're essentially a big slot receiver and you're going to go out and try and dime up safeties in the route tree, maybe that's not Colby. But you get bootlegs, you get play action, you get him in space where he can catch the ball, turn around, and size up a cornerback. That's where I think he's really dangerous. And McVay is the master at putting players in the best positions possible to take advantage of their strengths. So I'll be curious to see how Colby plays in this one.
I know, and one of the things that's cool, you see a lot of teams copy this now. I wouldn't say the Rams were the ones that started doing it. It's actually a lot of like Kyle Shanahan throwback stuff, Kubiak throwback stuff, and also Mike McDaniel was doing it, but McVay really kind of took it and made it a trend because he was doing it with so many different types of players. But those pre-snap shifts and the sifting or the escort motions, the really quick ones, they're using them with the tight ends and the run and the pass game. So like, they'll bring an escort blocker essentially across the formation, and they will like run a inside run out of it. But then sometimes they'll also have that guy release into a route through the same gap that he would block if it were a run, and then it's a pass. So the way that he can get them into space off the line of scrimmage and still hold disguise of run or pass, I think is what gives these tight ends such an advantage, frankly, because you're even seeing it, and I say this with all due respect to Davis Allen, you're even seeing it with Davis freaking Allen, where he's catching the ball in space and he's got all this wide open space around him. And again, respectfully, it's not because he's like has the sick ass release, he's not Devontae Adams.
Defensive coordinators are not losing sleep over Davis Allen.
Yeah, and no, it's really and with Colby, you're seeing the space that is created for them even before they reach the line of scrimmage, mathematically, is where I think that there's a speciality in what they can do with these tight ends, and they're going to need every bit of it this week. Yeah.
So it brings us to the $100,000 question, where if you get it exactly right, $100K into your bank account, tax-free.
Oh, yeah.
You got to get it exactly right.
That would be lovely.
Exactly. This is a net $100K, but you got to get it exactly right, Jourdan. What is the score on a cold, rainy Thursday night?
I think it's going to be close again. And I will say, I think that even though the Rams have improved their kicking game, I give Seattle obviously an advantage there. I am going to say 24-21, the Rams will win.
Okay.
And Seahawks fans, don't come at me. You know I had to pick the Rams.
Yeah. Well, and hey,
I love you guys.
I don't really feel like you're going out on a huge limb to pick arguably the best team in the NFL to win this game.
It's a real risk I'm taking here. You know?
Right. What I will say, and if I had to say neutral field, decent weather, whatever, like nothing too inclement, I think the Rams overall are a little bit better team. But I do think that we're talking about two teams that are in the same sphere. And yes. I do think short week, assuming Devontae Adams doesn't play, this is a game Seattle wins. And I'm right there with you. I've got it 23-20 Seattle. I think we're looking at a very similar style of game. And the reason for that is, what the Rams won by 2 at home in a game where they had like a 20-something yard per drive field position advantage over the course of a game. I mean, you multiply that by 16, 20 drives. That's pretty significant. I don't anticipate that happening again. And that's why I think Seattle comes away with this win. And if it goes either way that we're predicting, I'm still going to feel that these teams are in the same stratosphere as each other.
100%. And I would even go so far as to say, if these teams played 10 times, they would split right down the middle, in my opinion. I think
it feels that way.
And I don't think any other, like I said, the Broncos and maybe the Texans are creeping closer, but I don't think any other team is in the tier that these two teams are in right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, the way things are shaking out, one of these teams is probably going to get the number 5 seed and go on the road to play a 9-8 or an 8-9 NFC South team, which means we may very well, in fact, I would even say we'll probably see a third matchup between these teams, which would be really, really fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's really like that, those vintage, 49er Rams postseason matchups that it's for everything and it's demons being exercised midfield and all of these things. And Seattle is poised more so than I've seen probably in the last decade to actually go win the entire thing. And I don't care what people say about I believe in Sam Darnold. I have forever. I have for years. I watched him carve up in 2020. I watched him carve up the number 1 defense, the best defense the Rams had ever had to that point, with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey on the field. Yeah. So it's I know he can do it. I know he's capable of it. I know the Rams think that too. And Sean McVay talking this week, you can tell, and I know this because I know Sean, is he has so much respect for Mike McDonald. They are like-minded people. They're of the same brain, basically, in terms of the way that they can adjust, the way that they think about the sport, the way that they think about math in the sport and attacks and counterattacks. And it's when the chick in the chess show gets really high and the chessboard's on the ceiling and she can see all the levels and the layers of everything she needs to do. That's these guys, except
Queen's Gambit. Totally.
Queen's Gambit.
They're absolutely just mapping it out on the ceiling at night. Exactly. No, I mean, and the thing is they both seem like unique blends of, knowing their shit on a deep technical level without sacrificing the ability to communicate and connect on a human level as well. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see McDonald's career follow a similar arc as McVay's does, only with a different calling card. Listen, Jourdan, you are the best. I know how crazy this time of year is for you. It means the world that you came in, gave us a little bit of your time. Thank you again.
I'm happy to be here. It was a joy, as always. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the game of the year. Listen, before you get out of here, remind everyone where they can get more of you and your stuff.
Yes, well, if you don't hate me for picking the pick I picked at this point, you can follow me at The Athletic. I cover all 32 now, but obviously I'm still close in geographic location and also in mental, I guess, proximity to the Rams. But then I'm over on NFL Daily 3 times a week with the great, legendary Greg Rosenthal. So you can find us there too. We're going live on Thursday night as well. If you want more football, if you want more nerddom, I know they have to catch your show. And then, if you guys want a little dabble of NFL Daily in there too, come over and see us.
NFL Daily is appointment listening for me. So yeah, she's not just doing some self-promotion here. It truly is an amazing show. It makes me smarter every single week. Thanks again, Jourdan.
Thanks, Jacson.
Once again, a huge thank you to Jourdan for her time today. As always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jacson Bevins. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on both at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts on Twitter and at CigarThoughtsNFL.com on Blue Sky. You can watch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts and find the rest of our socials at CigarThoughtsNFL.com. As mentioned previously, this episode is brought to you by Balvenie Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of their lineup. We are thrilled to have them on board as a sponsor of the show. And one of the best things about a great scotch is how well it plays with a good cigar. So, once again, we do have our own special releases of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of the show. The release of these Cigar Thoughts stogies has been successful enough for us to continue offering them for the low price of $149. That's right, just $149 for a bundle of 10. As many of you know, we partnered with the most prestigious cigar manufacturer in the world to release these official Cigar Thoughts cigars, which you can order directly from CigarThoughtsNFL.com. Just follow the link on the show page to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year aged premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram and we'll send you the details directly. The cigars come with a Boveda humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh whether you have a humidor or not. Of course, you can listen to this show at fieldgoals.com and everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of this show. We know that you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it is an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.